Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome to Shakti's Gift. I'm your host, Marigold Era, Ayurvedic wellness coach, creative force, and unschooling mother. For the past 4 years, I've been living my daily life according to Ayurvedic principles. Ayurveda, which means the science of life in Sanskrit, is a traditional system of medicine with roots in ancient India. It emphasizes a holistic approach to health by balancing the body, mind, and soul. It utilizes natural remedy, dietary guidelines, and lifestyle practices to promote well being and prevent illness. I just want to be real clear with you guys. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychologist, but I am very passionate about this human experience and I'm all about being as sovereign as possible in our health. In this podcast, we will not only talk about Ayurveda, we will also meet a lot of wonderful people who are driven by the Shakti's gift of creativity, transformational force, and feminine power. So you'll be in contact with a lot of amazing beings who are doing the work, they show up, even if it's freaking hard, and they evolve. Because that's what we do. Our human life is ever changing. It is our nature to birth and bury new ideas and projects and to follow the seasons of our lives. So I invite you to grab yourself something to drink, get yourself comfortable, and let's dive deep into Shakti's gift. Welcome, welcome, beautiful beings. This week's episode is, a little different from what I usually present to you. Today we meet with Fatima Ali, a Muslim woman who studied in women's studies. She is now in a paralegal internship with an immigration attorney. Fatima is, she's living in Baltimore, the mother of 3 daughters from 6 to 20 years old. And together we talked about motherhood and womanhood in a more sociological way. So usually we talk about things in a more spiritual way here, but this week that's where it's kind of different. So we explored like what does it mean to be a woman who grew up in the 80s and like what does it mean for us to raise girls in this present society with social media and everything. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and let me know in the comment section if you would like more content like that. And yeah, also I'm trying to reach 100 subscriber on YouTube. So if you guys want to share this episode or another one that you prefer, it doesn't matter which one, but you can share one episode with your peeps. And if you want to tag me in that share, you have the chance to win a free consultation with me in a Ayurvedic wellness coaching session. So I invite you to do that if it feels right for you. And if it doesn't, that's completely fine. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this episode and I'll see you soon.
All right. All right. So today we have an amazing guest. I'm so excited. We were just talking before I hit the record button and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be such a good interview. So Fatima, like, how about you introduce yourself a little bit, like your background and your studies?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Fatima. So I grew up was born and raised in DC. My parents, my mom, she's from Guatemala and she's also, Spanish mixed and Mayan. My father, he's Black American and German mixed in his descent. And they're both Muslim, but everyone always asks me like, well, how did they become Muslim? They're not Arab. And I always tell them, literally, I think it was Malcolm X. My mom, she read Malcolm X, and in her heart, she was like, okay, whatever this guy is saying seems, be true to her, resonate with her. And my father, he, I guess it was like the Nation of Islam during that time or whatever that Malcolm X was mixed in. And so he was trying to figure out, who he was as a Black man in Washington, D.C. He eventually became a soldier and and he became Muslim somewhere and they met and had us. And so I grew up Muslim in DC and I experienced what that was like. I went to an Islamic private school. I feel like that kind of shaped my upbringing as a child, like, like where I get certain things from. And I eventually, went to college and I studied psychology and mental health because my grandmother, my dad's mom, she's a psychologist. And she had said something to me one time that just like really stuck with me. She said that, she said, Fatima, she said, it's really important to make sure that you help the women who are falling between the cracks. And I said, between the cracks? I'm like, what do you mean? And so like, I kind of understood what she means now, like there's a lot of things that are going on in women's lives that, that are not talked about. We still have like a lot of domestic violence and things like this. And so as I'm growing up, experiencing my own relationships, I figured that going into women's studies was also a way to go to understand, my life. I didn't think that it would become like, something that I would try to make money with. For me, going to college was something that I just wanted to understand for myself. I feel like that's what the spirit was moving me to do. And I didn't know why. I just felt like this is just something like I need to do. It just seemed like it was new in colleges. It was also like a new concept that happened to, that they had in my high school. They had women's studies in my high school. And I feel like it was like a trial run maybe for like high schools because we hadn't had like these whole, this whole concept of women's studies. It was very new. And so I felt in my heart, like, okay, I saw that, the university had this available. And I said, okay, I think I should do this. And I was right to do it because eventually after college, you become a mother, you have relationships that, that work or don't work. And being women, we're at risk for having children. And this is something, that happens to us while being alive. It happens or it doesn't happen. And even if you don't want it to happen sometimes. And but I feel like that being a mother has probably been like the biggest journey, life-changing thing,
Right.
If I was wanting to study anything, like studying my children, and how they're evolving, with what's going on today, it's just like, wow. It's something amazing to watch. And being a parent, it's just like, it just turns you into something that you didn't even realize you could be or do. And it just, I don't know, there's just like a sense of strength that comes with it.
Yeah, that's for
But,
sure. That's for sure.
And I'm still in school at this point. So, and that's to become a paralegal so that, because right now being a mother is my job, that's my job right now. And there's no shame about that.
Yeah. That's
and
full-time work right there.
Right. And I'm still a modern woman. I'm still a modern woman because I'm in these modern times, but I know what's most important right now. So yeah, that's me right now.
That's you. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm a mother as well. And I feel like you said, like being a mother, it's such a journey. I mean, it's a spiritual journey in itself, like to birth someone, like, and to just see them grow and be there for them and learning how to support deeply other humans. Like, it's just like, it's such a journey, right?
There's nothing like it. There's nothing else like it.
Yeah. So I'm curious about like your women's studies. We were talking a little bit before we record, and I mean, there's so much happening for women right now. Like, what did you learn that is most potent for right now? Like, what's happening right now for women?
It depends on, I really feel like on a sociological level, it really depends on where you live, like if you don't have like a high crime rate, like really like intense things that you have to deal with. Because right now I live in Baltimore, right? I live in Baltimore City. So what would be really crucial to me right now would be just being safe as a woman, just walking home or, walking from your car to your house. I have a friend who lives specifically in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
and she's Muslim. She's fully covered, but she was still like robbed at gunpoint outside of her car in front of her house. And
Wow.
so so that's what I mean by like, it's like by location. Because right now, like in DC, like back in the day, it used to be, it used to feel safe because I grew up in DC, Washington, DC. And but now it doesn't. Like I don't even, I tell my friends, like, that are from other places, I said, hey, if you're coming to DC, like, just be very careful.
Mm.
Uh, make sure that you're, not walking by yourself anywhere. And also for me, I have daughters. I have 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And one is about to be 20 years old. So I've been a mom for almost 20 years now. I know you said in one of your things that you've been for 12. I'm sure that might have changed by now, but I've been a
No,
mom
it's
for
that.
20,
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, 12 years. Just hit that.
12 years a mom. So I'm 20 years a mom. And what I feel is like, and so my daughters, I guess, are in that Gen Z, right? And so
Yep.
what does it mean to be girls growing up in Gen Z in
Mm.
America with a Muslim mother, right? Because I didn't force it. I don't force Islam on my children, right?
Mm.
Because we have a saying in Islam, like, there's no compulsion. We're not supposed to force anything on you. And also another little like inner community saying, like, we should take things in baby steps. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, don't anything, like just allow it to unfold organically, whatever it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So um I'm laughing because my daughters, I feel like they're so caught up in this Gen Z. They are TikTokers, they they do all these things. And as a parent, I'm just like, okay, let's make sure that there's like, safety locks and whatever, and make
Mm.
sure time. But for the 20-year-old, it's not the same. And so I just noticed that, the media and everything on TikTok, like it really does affect them. But it's just I don't know how to explain it. It's hard for me, I guess, to let her go, for her to be able to experience adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, how do you let your children grow up in like a time where it's just like, it's so hard to trust people. It's very
Mm.
hard to trust that, that people are going to have, the best intentions for you, that they're not going to try to harm you or use you or scam you or something like this. And maybe
Right.
that's because, that's our environment, I'm in a city, it's urban, like
Yeah.
that's impacting, because not everybody can, might not relate. But, you know, like the other day, she was going to go to a guy's friend house for the first time. And I said to her, like, like, are you sure? Is anyone else going to be there? And then it really became like just this one instance for like, well, how do you convey to a guy if anyone else is there? How long should it comes down to like, how long should you know someone before you even go out with them? It needs to stay in public, and it just going from there. So
Yeah. And how to teach our girls, how to deal with that, to be aware of the power of the feminine energy, and to understand like when this masculine energy is positive for us and when it's not, and to be like strong in our feminine energy without like falling into the traps of I want him to love me, or I want to please him, or maybe he can change, like that kind of those kind of thoughts, like that we can have as women. And so yeah, it's a big question just right there.
yes, there's so much that you're saying that resonates with me. Number one, like that sense that you were talking about, like, when do we know? A friend of mine, we were having that conversation of when do you know, certain things in relationships. And it comes with time. And we had made a joke that you would only have to have been born in the 80s to have like that innate sense. because I feel like we grew up in a time, I don't know, where it was like we were in between what was about to happen with the internet and leading up to the internet, like having like that social freedom, like that taste of anonymity that people are now have become so crass with, like that you can unpack that whole concept of anonymity and what it's done to us, like as a humanity, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's done something, like just having a veil behind us, it really like it seems like it unveils like our ugliness. That's what it's doing. Anonymous is unveiling like who we really are, like when no one's like looking at us, looking at our face. And so what I feel like it comes down to is just how conscious are you as a parent because of what's going on? Like how conscious are you of what's going on in relation to, you know, who you want to have as your children, you know, representing humanity, like who do you want as your children out in this world? And for as much as trauma as I've experienced growing up, you know, with my parents growing up in the 80s, specifically in DC and the Black community, where, you know, in the 80s, there was a lot of drugs, you know, that goes without saying what I probably had to experience. But, you know, as being a parent, you always say that, you know, you're doing your best. And so when I look back at my parents being parents during that time, they were doing their best despite what their environment, you know, was impacting on them, like specifically drugs. But I'm just like, I'm kind of impressed that even through that, they were able to keep a consistent apartment, you know, keep us fed, keep us in private school on top of that. All while my mother was becoming a nurse. And I'm like, she was on drugs doing that. I'm like, wow. And my father kept his job. So they were like functioning addicts. That's how I put it. And I'm kind of impressed that they were, you know, still with it, you know, to a degree so that I could, you know, be who I am today.
Yeah, you know, like life happened like that sometimes, and we learn from that. And it was a particular time to the 80s and the 90s. And I remember my father being super like feminist, and like he wanted my mother to work. Like it was so important for him that my mother would be in that movement and that she would be like that modern woman. And I feel like it kind of put a lot of pressure on women that just wanted to be mothers, right? Because that's a job, as we said at the beginning, that's a job, that's a full-time job. And our kids are the next generation, and they're the ones that are going to be supporting this society. And so we need mothers to be there for their kids, you know? And so it's like that balance of like wanting to be a mother and still wanting to be in that modern society. I feel like we're still learning that. I don't know how you feel about that. You said like,
no, I agree with you completely. I feel like there is an attack on motherhood right now. Like in America, I don't know what else is going. I don't know if this is the UK or any other societies that, you know, identify with like Western ideologies and things like this. But I really feel like there is an attack on motherhood. Like it's just like it seems like it's wrong, or that it's something bad, or that it's a waste of time. These are the impressions that I get. I don't know. I liked how you said that you allow your 6-year-old to play with like dolls and stuff like this. Like my 6-year-old, she is the same way. She is a nurturer. That is just natural for her. And you know, I think that we still have a lot of like, I don't know if it's cartoons per se, because I'm trying to think back, like what, you know, what ideas out there did I glean from, you know, the movies or culture from the like the art culture from growing up in the 80s? Like, was there anything that like made me have this idea of wanting to be maternal? And I don't think so. I never actually wanted to have children.
Me neither. Same. I was convinced I was never going to be a mother. I was like strong 100% sure, like 200%. I was like, I'm never going to have children in my life, you know, like it was sure.
Never gonna be me, you know. And then when I found myself pregnant at 19 going on 20, like I'm so glad that I can boast that I wasn't a teenager when I had my daughter, but I was like, I still couldn't even believe that I was pregnant when I was, because like, for me, like, I just remember like thinking about health class and seeing those diagrams and then seeing the baby and then seeing the cervix. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm like, that doesn't add up. I'm like, one and one don't make two. I'm like, this baby is just not going to come out of you, you know, like, so I think that, that alone is probably why I had to have an emergency C-section, because I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, it was just, it actually took me years. And this is, I don't know if this is, I don't know. I think Brooke Shields might have talked about this in her book, but it took, and maybe that was because of postpartum depression, which I did experience.
Oh yeah.
It took me a while to connect with my daughter. And that's what I found very interesting. And that was something that I had to do a lot of work on, with like, why? And, you know, going back to, of course, I had a traumatic birth experience. I had to have an emergency C-section. But I do think that created some type of disruption. I wasn't able to, you know, see the baby come out of me. I wasn't able to even see her after she was taken out of me. And so it's kind of like you're in a hospital room and you're just given this baby, and it's like, what? You know, like what just happened? And I was in that space of what just happened for like many years, like what just happened. And
yes.
And so I'm glad that I have maintained being in therapy throughout my life, because not just because of my childhood, but because of being in mental health and psychology. I always wanted to make sure that like I would have a therapist, you know, not on standby, but just in case, because I always wanted to have like someone to hold me accountable that wasn't going to be a judgmental family member, and, you know, someone that could just really be there to help me, you know, just stay accountable for whatever it is that I'm doing, so that I wouldn't go throughout my life, you know, just thinking like whatever thoughts I had were like, right. You know what I mean? I want someone to question me. And that's something that was very important that I learned in my journey of becoming, you know, a mental health professional, is that it's very good to have someone to check us. You know what I mean? Not just one, maybe two, you know?
Yeah.
Just for good measure. So, also, what I like about your introduction that resonates with me is you talking about, I don't know, it wasn't like consciousness, but just like spiritual alignment, or just alignment in general.
Yeah.
I think that's very important, not just for spirituality and being a mother and all these things, but also like being Muslim. I think what that means, being in alignment, I'm sure that means like a lot of different things to a lot of different people, you know, because cultures, you know, make us up, you know, and we make up our meaning based on, you know, how we grew up. But that's something that's very important to me. Like, I don't know about anything about numerology, or if any of your listeners, you know, do numerology or things like this.
Yes. A lot of them.
Really? Okay. Not that I have like lucky numbers or anything, but as I'm, you know, growing up throughout my life, I just noticed that to be in alignment meant some type of synchronicity. And for me, I'm just like, okay. And you're talking about, you know, what math meant to you in school, it was meaningless. And that's how I also felt about school. But then the only thing that I left with as important from anything that has to do with math in any capacity is that those numbers are absolute. That's all that I could take from it, right? Any math class is that this is absolute. And it's like, I feel like if we can, you know, if they don't change per location or continent, then, you know, then it's like something that you can work with, that's fact. And that's all I took in math. But looking back at my life, I like the fact that my mother was born on the 7th, and my best friend, she was born on the 7th, you know, different months. But then when my first daughter was born and she was born on the 7th, I was like, I didn't learn what the number 7 meant. I think it was a Christian friend of mine, or maybe it was my sister because she became Christian. Someone said to me, oh, well, 7 is like the number of completion. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I was like, it sounds good. And so my birthday just passed. I was born on 11/28. But what I found uncanny was that my first daughter, she was supposed to be born on my birthday, but she wasn't. She was late and she was born December 7th. Then for every daughter I've had after that, they're 7 years apart too. So I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm just rolling sevens. I feel lucky. But that's like the only thing I've noticed as far as like any type of synchronicity or alignment. It's like these numbers, seem to be very important. Also, my second daughter, which I thought was kind of funny, she was actually born at the time of 11:28 a.m. So I felt like it was the creator of the universe, because everybody says the universe, but for me being Muslim, I say the creator of the universe. So the creator, I feel like it gave me like a sign, like, this is, thing that's yours, because like it's a little joke between me and like, God,
Yeah.
like, okay, you're a little something born at 11:28. So then when I had my third daughter, 7 years apart, and by this time I was really into numbers. Like I'm the person who's like, oh, it's 111, and I'll text my mother, text message, I'm like, oh, it's 12:12. And so I'm on the operating table having my third C-section, and I'm looking at the clock, right? And it's about to say 3:33. No, it was 3:34. Yeah, I know that was a little joke. But then being Muslim, okay, so I took it a step further with the numbers, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get, my holy book involved. I'm going to see like where these numbers could take me. Because I always feel like when you're on a synchronicity vibe, that you got to follow it. It's like a puzzle. Life's a puzzle. Yeah. Let's see what little things we're going to get, little magical things we're going to get dropped in front of us for us to unfold in our little journey. And so I was like, okay, well, let's see what this 334 could possibly mean. So I opened the Quran and I went to like the 3rd chapter, and I went to the 33rd or 34th ayat. And what's funny is that I had named my daughter Noah, and that one of the lines, like the 33, chapter 30, whatever it was, if just following, that my numerical logic, it said, like, the sentence started it out and it was like, in the time of Adam and the prophets, and it said Noah. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, so my daughter's name was also in those lines. So I was like, there's another little gem, number. If I was going to follow it to any logical, numerological progression, So that's what I do in my spare time.
That is so cool. Yeah, that is so cool. I want to circle back to being Muslim in those times and these times that we're in right now. And I feel like your take on the way you're approaching religion is so interesting. So you want to share a little bit about that?
Oh, God, yeah. So my mother, she raised us in like this hippie way. So, and also what's different about, I don't know what anybody knows about Muslims, but there's two distinct sects. There's 15% are Shia and the rest, 85%, are Sunni. And Shia are particularly in like Iran, okay? And so the idea that I get between Sunnis and Shias is that Sunnis see Shias, like I think they're called heretics or something about Shias. I don't know what it is. I know people know about Sufis. Sufis are very loving Muslims. I feel like Shias are kind of like Sufis, you know what I mean? Because Iranians have like their background is like Zoroastrian or something. Like they have a different take on, I guess, being Muslim in general. And so I was raised Shia. So I feel like I was raised in a less strict Islamic environment, even though we were still told to cover. By the time my father, and my mother divorced, my mother wasn't going to force my sister and I to, wear hijab or whatever, because we're also, American. And, I think it's however your parents are when you're Muslim, like that kind of dictates like how Islamic looking you're going to be. But for me, I remember in my 20s, I had, Muslim friends, and one girl, she said to me, she's like, Fatima, she's like, if you look at it, she's like, we're not cultural Muslims. She's like, we're textual Muslims, being American. And I was like, oh, you're right. I was like, because we don't have like being American, you don't unless you're from another Muslim country like Pakistan or from somewhere else, we really don't have like a cultural context of what it means to be Muslim. We only have, this Quran, and we have, our Muslim communities, and like this is how we get our information. And I feel like we're very far, American Muslims are very far removed from cultural Muslims. Unless you come here from another country and you keep your culture while being Muslim, then you'll have the same, way of being, but then you're going to come in contact with issues that all Muslim families come in contact with, which is when you have children in America, it's hard to maintain whatever culture, whatever religion, like whatever you have going on, it is going to be impacted and it's going to erode and it's going to change. It's going to assimilate something. It's going to mutate. All these things are going to happen while you're trying to be you or your culture in America. Like America is going to challenge you. It's going to really challenge the integrity of whatever you got going on. It's going to challenge you. And I love the fact that I was born Muslim so that I wouldn't fall victim, I would say, to what is going on right now, especially being, I feel like what I mean by victim, I mean by, I'm glad I was raised with the concept that family is important, because if I feel like I didn't, and that's also growing up being, like Latin, like Latin American, like Hispanic culture, like family is always important, but relations are important to Muslims as far as family is concerned, because it's just, it's just the foundation. And so I feel like if I wasn't raised Muslim, I would probably, I don't know, I feel like because I didn't want to be a mother, I feel like I probably would have had more abortions. I wouldn't have let my children live. I would have been like, to hell with a family, you know what I mean? Like I would have been like, right, the music says be independent, Beyonce says, to the left, put them to the left, like all these things. And what's funny is that now a lot of the women from, my teenage years, and we're growing up, and it's like now women are just like saying, well, I should have never listened to Beyonce, like being independent. Like they're even questioning, like, well, Beyonce has a marriage, why don't I? So things like this, I'm just glad that I didn't let these things impact my decision making, because I always had a sense of like, I know what I wanted to do. Like since I was little, I always, like when I was 5 years old, probably because my grandmother was a psychologist and her daughter, my aunt, was a lawyer. So by 5, I said to myself, I'm either going to be a psychologist or a lawyer. And I've kind of, been studying in both those directions, even till now, trying to become a paralegal, still wanting to go to law school. But I always knew that as my life unfolded, doing whatever I was going to do, that I felt it was more important to have my children first, because I knew that education was always going to be there. Those schools are always going to be there. Those things are all like whatever we want now, it's always going to be there. But what you can't have later, and what will be difficult later and very trying, and now I have, friends going through this, it's very difficult to have a child, at our age. And so it's also heartbreaking to, see some of my girlfriends, like they really want to have children. And I mean, and I always say like, hey girl, like if it doesn't happen, adoption is always, another way, because it's heartbreaking also to see how many children are in need of parents and love, and I feel like, if we find ourselves in situations where we do want children and it can't happen, then we should, consider adoption or something, help another human being out, because it's rough here.
Do you think that with your women studying, like, do you think that feminism helped us, or did it like not help us so much?
I mean, going back to like the founding women of feminism, like for America, for instance, because I know that feminism started in different places, and,
Yes.
from different people. but like specifically in America, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott and all these women, oh my goodness, I think they'd be rolling over in their graves right now with what's going on. So I brought up the founding mothers for the reason of, well, specifically in America, because of the voting. Like that was one of the reasons that we needed like some type of equality just politically, you know, just to have a voice for voting. I mean, it sucks that we had to go so hard as women, like just to get something like that. If there was anything else in line that we needed to do, and I think this was like during the time of the 90s, like that glass ceiling, the concept of that, I think that we've definitely are done with that. When in the 90s, we kept going with it to make equality for like women to be in the army and things like that, that's when it started becoming really scary being a woman, growing up. And I think I was 17 years old, right, when 9/11 happened in 2001. I remember it. And the first thing I thought about being 17 was, oh crap, I'm going to be 18 soon. Am I going to be drafted? And what is that going to look like? Being a woman, being drafted, and being around all these men, and knowing that, you know, looking back to now, like we, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's happened with women getting into the military. There's rapes. There's been, I don't know, like murders or something. Like there was a big case of a Marine, a female Marine who went missing because of the soldiers or whatever. This kind of stuff is scary. Just the idea of even going to war. And I feel like with where we have gone with feminism, it's gone in a scary direction. Like I wish I could hear like the voices of other women, like, how do you feel, like from Gen Z? Like I wonder if someone could have a survey for Gen Zers and say, hey, are you cool with being drafted as a girl? Like, you know, like what? Like, I don't even know if they're thinking about these things. I think they should, because I feel like with the direction that the world is going, it might be a very real possibility. And if women's studies has led us to this, then I feel like, yeah, it's kind of hurt us in a way that it's like, you know, if the idea of being a woman in relation to a man is that, you know, a man, like these tropes, he's supposed to be a protector, provider. If I'm equal to the protector and provider, I definitely don't want to go to war. I definitely would not want to go to war. I really feel like that is for men. That is for testosterone bodies, not for bodies that are, you know, preparing for childbirth. Or, I mean, I couldn't even imagine a pregnant woman on the battlefield. Like, I don't know.
Right. So absurd. These subjects are so taboo. I mean, like, I'm all for like everyone being themselves. And if one woman feels like she wants to go in the military, like free will, like she wants to go, like I'm all for it. But like to have no choice, or to see women trying to act like men so much because we want the equality, it's like, and if it were like the opposite, if men were trying to be like women, I feel like it wouldn't be good either, you know, like we're so different. And I don't, like, I know it's so taboo, and like I know that women fought so much for us to have like the same salary and the same advantage and like all of that. And it's like sometimes I'm just questioning, like, is it really what we're here to do? Like, or is there something else? You know, I'm not against it. I'm not for it either, but I'm questioning it. I'm just like wondering deeply, like, what does it mean if women are equal to men? Like, are, like you said, like, are we going to start being the protector when our men, like, I don't know. It's like, it's tricky because some women have more testosterone, and like they have more muscle mass. Like like I've seen them, like, and it, like, I don't want to like deny them of who they are, you know, and I don't want this stereotypical version of either of those gender. Like, it's not what I'm aiming for, but it's like, like with feminism, it feels almost like we're wrong to just wanting to stay home with our kids. And it's like why, like shouldn't we have like the free will for that as well, like
that, I'm glad that you say that. Like, I like when I see like, that's why I bring in like the rest of the world, because I know that you're in Canada, right?
Yep.
I'm in the States. And I'm glad that we have a whole world where there's other countries to look to, because I feel like there's other countries, I don't know specifically, I haven't like studied any of this, but I feel like I'm sure there's a country out there that has a good balance of the feminine and the masculine, and how they're delineating certain like categories of work, like for security or whatever. Like I know in Iran, like they have women police and things like that. I know in Saudi Arabia too, there's Muslim women police. Like they've been progressive, specifically in Saudi Arabia, with allowing women to drive the cars, and then to have this police task force. I've even seen some women, like Muslim women ninjas, who are like wearing chadors, like they're fully covered, but they're like ninjas. And I'm just like, wow. I'm like, so exciting, because it's true. There are women, and I'm like Joan of Arc, there are always going to be women who want to step up to the plate. You know what I mean? Whether it's from testosterone or whether it's just from courage.
Yeah. Like, and to just like really question, like, what am I here to do? What do I want to do? What is my place here, individually and truly, like from a space of love, so that we can like move forward in this society. Because those wars and those social situation, like they can change, like you said, like they can change really quickly. It's just a matter of how we're acting on a daily basis, and if we're acting from fear or if we're acting from love. It's just like, for me, that's what it boils down to.
What you're saying reminds me of a book. There's the author, I think it's Stephen R. Covey, from the guy who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He wrote another book. I think it's called First Things First. Yeah, First Things First. And I didn't finish reading it completely, but I do remember the beginning, about like the introduction, like how he wound up writing, First Things First. And it was because of a conversation with his daughter. She had just become a mother. And once she had become a mother, she realized that her life, like what she wanted to do, was on hold. And he said to her, what you're doing right now is very important, because it's also temporary and things are going to change, over time. And he said eventually something to the degree like, you're going to find your true north. And I hear this concept, this phrase used a lot, people finding their true north. And I mean, I think that really resonates with anybody, because it's like, if you're holding a compass in your hand and let's say the thing that's going on in your life is the compass, right? The direction, you're holding it in front of your hand, it's whatever is in front of you, at that moment in time. It could be that person, it could be that whatever that you're encountering, like that's the true north. It's whatever you're encountering at that time. And I love the whole concept that things are temporary. You know what I mean? You can count, like the only thing that we can count on is change. You know what I mean? We can never count on things to stay the same. Yeah. And I think we get out of that mindset that, nothing's going to change, or nothing's going to happen. That's a lie. That's a lie. The world will tell us, and that is not true. Things will change. Things do change. It's inevitable. Yeah. It's the only thing that does happen.
Yeah. Nature is there to remind us every day. In America, especially, it's like nature is always changing. Like you got like the season, and like sometimes it's going to be windy and sometimes it's going to be sunny, and it's never the same. And it's just like a reminder of like, things are changing all the time.
Right. And there's something to learn from it, that like, yes. The fall itself, the darkness in itself, and that, I'm glad you bring up seasons, because that reminds me of, gosh, there was another good book. I think it was a fiction book. It was called The Red Tent by, I think, Anita Diamant.
Yeah, I read that. So good. Oh yeah, so good. Yeah.
So just to think about the concept of menstruation, right? For me, not for every woman, not for every person who has a period, right? Let's put that out there. It does bring a shift. It brings like an emotional shift. It it brings me like to a profound level. I don't want to say it's a darkness, but it's a definite deepness, you know?
Oh yeah.
And I feel like when I think about like ancient times, like what was it during the Alexandria or something, like I just know that in Egypt there was some libraries that were burned, or there was probably like, I feel like there was information that was lost. And if there was any a time, I feel like there was like information, like spiritual information for like women. I feel like, you know, from like maybe the Queen of Sheba or something. I feel like we lost that. And I feel like I used to like, my imagination runs wild, but I used to have this imagination that there was definitely some scroll in there that had some information about how important menstruation is, how powerful it could be for women.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's lost information about that. And I feel like within myself, and I'm sure there's other women who feel the same way, that there's almost like a magic to it.
Yeah.
I noticed that that's only sometimes the time that I can actually feel deeply and profoundly. Like sometimes, like if my period's not near, or whatever, I'm just, you know, it's not around, I'm going throughout life, and you know, and I don't know how people think, how women think, or how men think women think, but I don't really think too deeply, or I don't really have that many thoughts on my head. But come period, you know, like I'm gonna have different feelings, and I think that's when I actually feel the most feminine.
Yeah.
Besides having experienced being pregnant and giving birth, because I've noticed that whatever it means to feel to be woman, for me, I've never felt like it was like something that's acute or something. I just felt like, oh, I think being a woman is like when I had a baby or when I was breastfeeding. I'm like, these are what I feel like are the differences in being being embodied in a female body.
Mm-hmm.
These are the differences from just not being in a man's body. I could go on about this because I feel like I have, I never did past life regression therapy or anything like this, but I know that, you know, these things are accepted today. We do have them, but for sure, I know that this is not the first time I've been here being alive, you know, like I've had that sense growing up. And so anytime I talk to my friends, they know that I always talk about being a human being in relation to all of a sudden now being in a female body. Mm-hmm. And that I always have like these comparisons of like, well, it, you know, like for instance, breastfeeding is what made me feel feminine, or sometimes just putting lipstick on because I'm like, oh, this is being a girl. Or this is what society tells me is to be a girl, you know, and to be cute, earrings on, things. And sometimes I really feel like I'm a man playing dress up. So, because I've always felt so, honestly, I've always felt very masculine. And I think that's probably being raised by a soldier, you know, like our environment impacts us. I was raised by a soldier. My mom was a nurse. So I have a very clinical way, a very practical way of being. My sister is like, we're like night and day. She was the more feminine one. If any idea of femininity I ever garnered, if it was from her, I probably rejected it because, you know, when you have sibling rivalry, you're like, ugh. So I think I probably rejected femininity, or, you know, the idea of it being girly girl, you know, because I didn't like my sister. So I was always a tomboy. But yeah, so I've always looked at life in relation to, you know, what does it mean to be a woman as I'm a girl growing up into womanhood, and I just feel like it's whatever, you know, we're impacted by that happens to women, like giving birth and having families, or experiencing, you know, relationship violence or something, because those are things that are kind of like in relation to men that are negative, that a lot of women are impacted by, like rape, things like this. And I think, what's the statistics now? It's like 1 in 3 women will get raped. Like that's kind of like, that's really scary. You know what I mean? To hear those kind of statistics, which, you know, goes back to being a mother. And one of the things, you know, I tell my daughters and their fathers, like, make sure that we have them in self-defense or something. Like, this is just very important. But yeah, so it's
Yeah.
really being a woman in today's world.
Yeah, it can be stressful. And I think it's time for us to redefine the whole thing and to let go of the past and let go of like the fight and step into something new, because I feel like, yeah, I just feel like we're at our turn right now where everything is shifting, and this thing is shifting too, even the masculine energy is shifting, and we need to step outside those like shadowy um perception that we can have on women and men. Like I was raised by a man, as I said earlier, that was a feminist, but he was alarming us about all men being nasty and aggressive, and um that they were gonna attack us or rape us, and it's just like, it's just like so crazy because he was a man.
But
And
can I
he,
ask you something?
yeah.
I'm glad that you said that, because those are the same things that my father would tell my sister and I. And my sister and I would always have a good conversation about, well, what do you think? Because we have a lot of friends, and to various degrees, have been in different situations where, they could have gotten raped, have gotten raped, things like this. And my sister and I, we think that because of the way how our father described men like that, we had a certain, like, and maybe that's what I was saying earlier. When you're growing up in the 80s, you have a certain level of caution when it comes to like a certain sense. And maybe it's because our fathers talk to us like this. Because when I have the friends that have been raped, I have asked them, I'm like, well, we would discuss a lot of things. And one thing that I noticed is that their fathers definitely didn't talk to them, about men like this, and I'm just thinking, like, did they not have that same caution meter that, maybe someone, being talked to by our father. I mean, like, I don't know if anything has happened to you. Like, I have experienced rape, but only in the sense of like, my boyfriends, were going too far. It was never like a stranger or something, you know what I mean? Um, and so like those are the only instances that I had. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I don't know. I definitely couldn't prevent like nothing my father said could have prevented those relationship moments where, your boyfriend's going too far after you have said no. But I mean, like, do you think that what your father has said, has that impacted you along the way? Like, I'm just curious.
Well, yeah, it sure did impact me, but not in the sense you're saying, but more of, you know, me trying to be strong and protect myself instead of having a masculine model of a man that will actually protect me. So I never had this man. He was just like telling stuff. But when my uncles were doing gross thing to me in the living room, and he wasn't protecting me from that. I mean, and when he was like doing even him like talking about my own body and like in ways that are super disrespectful, or like entering the room when I'm having my first sexual encounter, and like, it's just like, why do you do that? It's just like, it's so disrespectful. And so by having a man that is supposed to be there to protect me as my father, being there to tell me not to do this and this and this, and to worry about all men, but not protecting me, like, it's like this do as I say, not as I do, and it's confusing. It's just
Right.
confusing. And you don't know, like, I didn't know that I could actually trust a man, I never knew that up until the moment where I met my husband. And even sometimes I'm still battling, like, can I trust him? We've been together 10 years, we're married, we have kids, like, but sometimes, like, I would go back to those state of like being that in that feeling of being unsafe, and then I will question if I can actually trust him. But I know I can trust him, like,
Right.
but yeah, it definitely did impact me. And that's why, for me, that's why it's so important for our little girls to have those model, the men that will be there to protect them no matter what it costs, you know. I like to That's what I'm saying to my husband. I'm like, you got to be this role model. You got to be like that strong masculine energy for them to understand that this exists. It exists. And so if they focus on what is there for them, like that masculine, protective, safe man, like that's what they're going to attract, because they're going to be able to see it. But if we're taught by our fathers, uncle, grandfathers, whatever, you know, significant men in our lives, that men are dangerous, well, that's what we're going to attract. We're going to attract those dangerous men for sure. The brain will always try to confirm a belief. And so if we believe that men are all shit, we're going to attract men that are shit, so we can convince ourselves to do, yeah, you know, I knew it. I knew that men were shit, you know? But that's not true. That's just a version, because we're attracting who we are, you know? And so it did impact me. Yeah. In that sense.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said, because I did that. My father, for all that he said too, he was also molesting us too while he was on drugs. You know, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
Everything that was going on during the 80s. So yeah, and
I know, right?
with that, yeah, you have to learn how to retrust as you're, you know, as we're still growing up, as we're still, you know, unfolding as being mothers in relationships, you know. Yeah, that's definitely
a process. Yeah. That's a process. But
constantly in a state of forgiving and healing at the same time.
Yes, that's what it is. And for me, when I forgave my father, because right now I have no animosity about it, like, he's done what he was able to do, and like he did his best. You know, I deep inside of him, I know he wanted to protect me and probably didn't know how to, you know, because, and then he was using his voice to me to protect me, instead of like using his voice to the other men's around that were not acting right. You know, that's the difference. And so for that, when that happened, like, of course, a little girl will step into her masculine power. Like that's what it is. And I was in my masculine power, like you said, like you felt more masculine. Of course, you need to protect. There's like, we have all of those energy inside of us. We have the masculine power and the feminine power inside of us. But for me, in my perception, since I've incarnated in this life as a woman, I need to learn how to be a woman, and I haven't had any healthy role model of like strong women that are not strong because they're trying to be men. They're strong because they're embodying this feminine energy, you know. And so that's what I'm looking to create with this next version of the podcast, because I think it's so crucial that us women step out of the masculine roles, and but not in the way that, like, I don't want women to go back in the 50s where we have to stay home. And like, I mean, I love doing this podcast. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I'm still working. I'm not with my kids right now, but we arranged stuff with my husband and we created our life so that I can actually be with my girls and do stuff that I love without depraving anyone. You know, it's like, it's all about like creating our life and embodying the true self that we are, you know. And it's like, so that's what we're here to learn. And the feminine energy is like the precursor of all of that in my head. And so if the feminine energy is able to step inside is power, like we're gonna, I don't know, impact the men in our life, you know, in a way that they're going to be able to be outside carrying that love, that nurturing, caring energy that we provide them, so that they can provide us with other stuff.
I love everything that you said, and it's kind of paints a picture in my mind that I don't know, I because I'm not single, but I would really love for those who are single, to experience, the oneness of being with someone because experiencing creating a family with a man, being a woman, I mean, that, like, we were talking about motherhood, right? That in itself is a wonderful journey, but being a mother while in relation to having a partner, right? That is another like amazing, layer, right? I always tell my daughters, I don't care what you become, as far as religion, but everyone has a right to have their Adam and Eve experience. And that's one of the things that's kept me not single, I think, is that I just always had this thing where it's like, oh, from Christianity, Judaism, whatever, or any type of origin stories, there's always a man and a woman, there's always some type of creation. And I feel like we have a right to have that experience. And that's what I've been on a journey of. It's like, who's like, being a woman, like who's the love of my life? Who am I going to marry? Who am I going to do whatever with? I mean, I don't want to grow old alone and die alone. I mean, we all came here alone. We're going to die alone. But, like in the meantime, like, how are we going to spend this journey with having a companion? I feel like today's time for women, we're told that you can't work on yourself while being in a relationship. And I've learned that that's a lie. I've been focusing on whatever relationships I've had since I was 13 years old. And I've been reading about relationships since I was 13 years old and looking at my relationships and studying them from the books that I was reading, like Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus and things like that. And I would look at my relationships and I would see, okay, what's going on here? And I realized from 13 to now, looking at my relationships, it really is important, working on yourself. Therapy is always good if you know you need it. But realizing that you're also growing with someone else. And if you're lucky enough to have a partner who loves learning as much as, as maybe you do, or I know that I do, that's a wonderful journey. I've cut people off. I've cut guys off in relationships because they told me, like one guy told me, everything I needed to learn, I learned in college. I don't need to read any more books. And that was me trying to sit down with them and actually, read to them so that we could, better our relationship prior to maybe going to couples therapy, something. I was trying to do something. But I noticed that for as much as, we can be nurturers as women, because men are nurturers too.
Well, yeah.
It's really nice that when you have someone who's aligned with you in this journey, understand like what the assignment is, as far as like being together with someone and working on that with you. And it's like, if you're lucky enough to find that, because all of these, it's very hard to even get a date these days, let alone go from a date to having marriage and having a baby. All these steps are very hard. But if you're lucky enough to already be experiencing this, like, hold on to whatever relationship you have and work on it, because finding the love of your life or finding someone that you can connect to, it's rare, and someone that is willing to, do the work, that's rare. I know I keep talking about a lot of books, but there's another book that if you have the time to read, and I'm still reading it, it's called Faith and Feminism, A Holy Alliance, right? Her name is Helen LaKelly Hunt. She's PhD. But that goes back to the origin stories, because you were talking about like what it means to be a woman in today's time. And you don't want to go back to the 50s. I don't want to go back to the 50s. I don't think any of us want to go back there. Because what I think was wrong was that men were taking advantage of their male privilege, right? They were taking advantage of their power. My grandmother, who's a psychologist, she said to me, she's not well anymore, but I feel like she's on her deathbed. But one of the things she last said to me, she's still alive, thank God, but she said to me, because I was the same grandmother who said to me, Fatima, you need to focus on the women who are falling through the cracks. And that led me to my journey until today. But she also said, fast forward until like a few years ago, she said to me, Fatima, with what's going on, it seems like the tides have turned for women because men have been so toxic that this is now like their like, it's like their turn to get like a woman's animosity or whatever men were doing. It's like the tides have turned because of all of this stuff that they had done for time immemorial. It was almost like the worst type of payback, and so I just don't think that it doesn't need to be that way. Like if we go back to the basics of how I don't know when times were good, but
Right.
like even in the 50s, even in the 50s, I feel like there's always those lucky few relationships where the men of that time weren't toxic and they allowed their women to be whoever they were. And those were the healthy relationships. I wish that we could see more movies about the times from back in the day when things seemed unhealthy, but there was something healthy going on that maybe led us to where we are now, you know, like those relationships. And I feel like you're right, we have to find a good balance of the masculine and feminine, and definitely being a woman and being stressed does bring out the masculinity in us. So it's a delicate balance being in a relationship with someone and them being the male and you being the female, and not being stressed so that you're not masculine, or them understanding that it takes this to happen for us to stay feminine, for them to stay masculine. And, you know, it's just like this whole give and take and this dance.
Yeah.
And how well are you getting, you know, how, if you're dancing, how well are you, how well are your moves? Are your moves good enough for this dance? And do you need to learn more dance moves to make this dance better, you know, to have this harmony in your relationships?
And we learned that together. Like when we embrace this journey, we learn together and walk hand in hand. And sometimes we fall, and it doesn't matter like if we don't do the right steps, you know, into that dance, because we're just gonna step on their toes. But that's okay, because they're gonna forgive us, and they're gonna step on our toes sometimes because they didn't know the moves, right? And we're learning that together. And that's the beauty of it.
Right.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on today. It was so great.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate that you're here with me. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode with people you think might benefit from it. If you need support with your lifestyle and well-being, feel free to reach out to me. It will be my pleasure to help you with an Ayurvedic consultation. You can go to my website, marigoldera.com, to book a session with me. Remember, in the wisdom of Ayurveda, self-care is not a luxury, but a sacred responsibility and a journey of nurturing oneself to foster holistic well-being. I wish you an amazing rest of your day. Much love to you, and I'll see you in the next episode.